Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I am a licensed psychologist, and it is time for the Tea. Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Hello everyone, welcome to the Wednesday that is before the Wednesday before Christmas. I know that this has been a tough month for us already. We have almost hit the mark of 800,000 deaths related to COVID. We have watched over the past couple of weeks several very difficult trials. Kyle Rittenhouse, the men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. We are now going into looking at Kim Porter and her killing of Dante Wright. We have seen so much death and destruction and devastation, tornadoes in Kentucky. We are looking at floods and fires, natural disasters that have occurred throughout this year. We are constantly feeling like we're on the brink of war as we look at what's going on now in Russia. There are just so many challenges, China. There are so many challenges that we're facing as we hear about sex trafficking, as we see people being killed, as we see students being fearful of going to school. And it can be really difficult to even feel like you can get in a celebratory mood for the holidays because of all of these very traumatic things that can be going on around us at any given moment. We are struggling financially with gas prices, with the prices of food and other things. Homelessness, there has been an end to the moratorium that was placed on people being able to stay in housing even if they couldn't afford rent or mortgages. That has ended, and we're seeing a lot of people now struggling to be able to find housing, and the cost of housing has skyrocketed. And so being able to find something that one can manage this season still is filled with unemployments and layoffs and companies with bankruptcies and people being terminated right before the holiday season. So we have a lot of challenges that we're facing in any given moment, and going up until the holidays, Christmas in particular, can be a source of distress for a lot of people because it's just so much on your mind that you find it difficult to focus on the reason, as they say, for the season. So let's get into our topic for today. You're like, I am going to turn this off because this sounds like this is going to be absolutely depressing. The topic for today is tree trimming and trauma as we learn to manage guilt, sadness, and the suffering of this world. So, first of all, let me just normalize for you that there are going to be times in our lives where our hearts are just heavy, where we have experienced things that are very difficult. Sometimes we struggle with why are we still here? Why am I the one that got to tell the story? Why am I the person that came back from that combat tour? Why am I the person that survived this tornado? I was listening to the news this morning, and you have to be so careful about listening to the news because there's so many triggering and traumatic things that could be said at any given point. Um, where this lady was describing as she's by one of her coworkers, him telling her he could not breathe, and her wondering like why was I the one to be saved and he wasn't, he didn't make it. um, Survivor's guilt, right? Like, so we get so sad. We feel so upset that we're still here. Why did I survive and this other person died? What could I have done different to change that outcome? Am I responsible for a person? Even as we think about cases of breakups and other things that may lead to people who ultimately decide to take their own lives via suicide. Was there something I didn't see? Was there something I didn't notice? Was there something that I could have done? We just feel so guilty sometimes about us being spared, us being saved, maybe not struggling as much as other people are struggling. We just feel ungrateful. Why am I even complaining? There are so many things that I could be experiencing that I'm not. There are so many people that have it so much worse than I do. Like, I don't get a chance to feel sad. I don't deserve to feel this sadness. Like, I need to get past this and stop loathing over things. Sometimes we can just over identify with other people's pain too, and you can just feel it's you've heard somebody say, so in watching Ahmaud Arbery, his mother, talking about her experiences through this trial, the things that were said about her son, the very hurtful things, and just I think sometimes we can over identify with someone else's pain, identifying with her pain as a mother, identifying with her pain as a mother of a black male. And so you get to a point where you're constantly thinking about what this person said, what this person looked like, what they might have been experiencing, how they must have felt, and it will become intrusive into your memories, into your dreams. Even when you're trying not to think about it, or you're distracted, you think you're distracted, those thoughts will come in there. And this suffering. Why do people have to suffer? We feel guilty because we have lives that other people can't have. I got to come back, you didn't. I survived that accident, you didn't. You had this negative experience where you were abused, demeaned, belittled, and I wasn't. And it can be difficult for us to feel like, well, can I enjoy things? It feels like I'm bragging, or it feels, at this holiday time as I'm celebrating, and we may have things that other people don't have. We just feel like, well, I shouldn't be enjoying things that other people can't enjoy sometimes. And we can just become enveloped in that sadness. It just seems like so much bad is going on that it's just hard to find that joy in things, or feel like that we should be able to write those shoulds. I shouldn't be joyful and happy during this time when so many people are dealing with loss and sadness. We talked last week about dealing with loneliness over the holidays, and people that may be struggling with this first Christmas after they've lost someone they loved, after a breakup, after a separation, after dealing with these difficult things. And here I am, posting pictures of what we had for our Christmas dinner. We also, I think, overestimate our ability to control things, to be able to influence things. We give ourselves a lot more power than we really have, or we give ourselves the perception that we have a lot more power than we really do have, to be able to change outcomes, particularly when it comes to people experiencing trauma. So, what can happen as a result of this? We're dealing with all of these different emotions, this anguish, this pain, this guilt, this sadness, and you can feel really helpless. And in that helplessness, because as we know, one of the things that triggers trauma are very strong emotions. And so, in this helplessness, in this sadness, in this hurt, then I may have flashbacks of things that have been traumatic for me, things that I've seen, things that I've experienced, things that I've heard about. And so, I'm beginning to experience more of those intrusive memories, and they're showing up in various ways in my life. I may be more irritable. I may have more mood swings and outbursts than I would typically have. I can just find myself obsessing, in those wee hours of the night where you're waking up out of your sleep, and your mind is just racing, it's just going, and it feels like you can't turn it off. And you would give so much to just be able to quiet it and have some peace. And this is when we can sometimes start to feel suicidal, because I don't want to have to be in this anguish, I don't want to have to be in this pain, I don't want to have to be dealing with this. If this is going to be how I feel, it can be really hard to want to move forward. If this is the type of life I'm going to live, if this is the type of world I'm going to be in with all this suffering and pain, it just feels like, why bother? Like, why would I want to be in this space? So that can interfere with sleep. It can interfere with eating. We can be overeating. We can be under eating. Headaches are very common in those cases. And you just feel like your stomach's in knots, like, which is one of the reasons why sometimes we find it difficult to eat when we're under periods of high stress, the heart racing, the vigilance, the having difficulty just finding joy in things, right? All of these things that can contribute to us having depression, anxiety, right? The PTSD. So what do we do about that? How do we manage? Because we do know that there is never going to be or ever going to be a shortage of disasters and traumas and all of these things in the world that are sad. Right? So you're like, okay, Dr. Tarver, where are we going with this? Because it's still sounding really, really depressing here and defeatist. I say that to say part of us being able to cope is allowing ourselves to grieve. You are going to experience sadness. You are going to experience loss. And those emotions are important too. Allow yourself to be able to sit in pain sometimes, right? Allow it to wash over you in the discomfort that it is, in the hurt that it is, because sometimes we just simply need to allow ourselves to experience those uncomfortable emotions. We don't have to stay in that place, but we need to allow ourselves to be able to experience that grief. And then after I've experienced that grief, then I can work on my soothing, right? So then it may be that I want to do something positive. I want to add something of worth and value. I want to take this, what seems like sadness and devastation, and turn it into something positive, right? Because this is often where people get ideas for community service organizations or groups or starting nonprofits or starting scholarships or funds, feeding people, clothing people, coming up with all of these ingenious ideas to be able to support the world around them. And don't get me wrong, it does not have to be something that changes the world. It may just be something that changes one person. It may be that you go get groceries for that neighbor. It may be that you cut that neighbor's grass because you know they're not in a position to do so. They're elderly. They're by themselves. Maybe they just had a recent surgery. Maybe they had a recent loss, and so that act of kindness, sticking a note in somebody's mailbox, having a meal delivered to someone, those kind of things that make us feel like we have some meaning and purpose, we're doing something that contributes in some positive way, can make all the difference as we're managing the sadness and the suffering and the trauma that exists in this world. Another thing that we can do is look, practice self forgiveness, right? So just focusing on me and the guilt that I may have about things. Like, I may be holding on to some things. Maybe there are some ways that I hurt some people in my lifetime, and I'm thinking I've caused some people some suffering. I've been the reason why some people couldn't sleep at night. I've been the reason why some people had a negative day or a negative experience. I've done that. And so forgiving myself for whatever I may have done to cause someone else pain or to not assist when I could. I always think about Spider-Man. I know a lot of you follow the Marvel series, but as I think about Spider-Man and his regret, his guilt about not stopping this criminal who later then murders his uncle Ben, right? And that his this is where the saying from with that you have a lot of responsibility, right? Great power comes great responsibility. And so I have to be able to, yes, realize that I've done some hurtful things and also forgive myself and be able to make amends where I can and do some things different moving forward, right? He could not go back in time and change that, but he could go moving forward to do something productive, right, for somebody else in their life, and to take that pain and out of that pain give himself purpose, right? So those are some of the things that we can do. There are people out there that are thinking and feeling very similar to you. So find your tribe, find your people, find your support out there, whether that's friends or that might be a support group. It may be a faith-based institution. It may be grounding you in your spirituality, your values. So finding other people to be able to allow you to share in a space like, hey, we're feeling the same way. We don't always have to fix it. Sometimes it's just good to know that I'm feeling similar things, right? The normalizing it. And that's so important in this process. It is absolutely normal for you to feel sadness and grief, to experience guilt sometimes. These are normal reactions to trauma. And so sometimes being with a group of people that understand and have experienced it, like, and so it normalizes for me what I'm going through, but it also gives me a group of people to be able to share the load, right? So I can be able to release these things in this safe space. Friendships are important. Relationships with people are important because we need support, right? Sometimes we just need a hug. Sometimes we just need to say, I don't know how it's going to be okay, but it's going to be okay. Or sometimes we need people to say, it's not going to be okay, but I'm going to be here with you so you don't have to be by yourself in it not being okay, right? These things matter. But also, sometimes we need to take breaks, right? We need to take breaks from social media. We need to take breaks from the news. We need to take breaks from things that are contributing to our trauma. All the time, we don't know. Sometimes there'll be trigger warnings for things, and people are trying to get a little bit better about being sensitive to information. Like you'll see the videos that come across now. Hey, this is trauma sensitive information in here, so be very mindful about when you open this link. So that gives us an opportunity to be selective about what we see and what we hear. But all the time, you don't get that. You may not know something is going to be triggering for you. But what you can do is, I like to say, stack the deck, right? Stack the deck in your favor. Make sure that the things that you're listening to are things that are going to nurture you, encourage you, power you, support you, as opposed to potentially being something that's going to add to that negative emotional state. Right. So what are the things that give me joy? What are the messages that I like to hear? What are the images that I like to see? So I can make sure that I'm putting those things in place to help offset some of these intrusive negative memories that I may be experiencing. You know, the I think the main thing for me is also just understanding the dynamics of things, right? So, and this is how we shift from feelings of guilt, because oftentimes we're blaming ourselves because we're taking responsibility for things that we had no control over, right? So, understanding the dynamics of things that occur. Natural disasters occur. There are things that are just outside of our control. Unfortunately, there are some things that people can learn to do better in a situation, but understanding these dynamics allows us to, like, hey, I didn't know that you were in that pain, so I couldn't have acted any different. I'm using hindsight now, right? This is our bias. When I know how the outcome turns out, then of course I can go back and say, oh, I should have seen it. But in the moment, I did the best that I knew how to do. And so I have to realize the external factors that had nothing to do with me, so that I don't take that on, right? I got enough that I'm over here dealing with. I don't need to take on other stuff that's not mine to own, right? And being able to separate that out so we can work through that guilt that we have. Um, Sadness, guilt, regret, they can all exist along with joy and excitement and gratitude. And I think it's important that we give space to all of those things, that we don't try to just stay in the place of joy. You all know one of my favorite movies is Inside Out. Joy had to learn that all the emotions are important. So it's important for us to experience all those things. They can all exist together. And so if I give them space, if I give them each their time, allow myself to grieve, allow myself to be sad, allow myself to be hurt. And then I also find things to be joyful about, things that I'm grateful for, things that I appreciate and that I value. I can shift myself into this space of being well. Take care.